Thank you all for being here. Unfortunately, you are stuck with me because Jacob is at a Mets game. So I'm here to kind of guide us through the night with Maria as well. I will be one of the first people reading, unfortunately, as well. But before I do that, quick couple of thank yous I think are in order. One, the very charming Anna Minority, thank you so much for being our faculty advisor for the Fingerprint Test. Without your help, I don't think it would be possible for sure. Also, an unsung hero hiding there in the third row, that would be Viva. And Viva was the editor-in-chief of this edition. There is so much work actually that goes on behind the scenes for this to actually come into print. A lot of work, a lot of cracking the whip on people who maybe don't answer the email that they're supposed to or something like that, which I would know nothing about. But and then also to Maria as well, who graciously definitely puts a lot of work into setting this up and kind of making this possible. Okay, so that's my stalling before I read. I won't introduce myself with this long, arduous name, but I'm Mac. My pen name is Macintosh Bennett, which is actually a tribute to my grandmother. That is her maiden name. And the piece I'm going to read today is called The Pipe. I write in a makeshift office, a place one might call an electrical closet. The ceiling is lined with ancient, rusty pipes that go clink clang at unpredictable times. The walls are a spider web of wires, a tangled mess of frayed cables that wind this way and that and meet up at a beat up old junction box, a piece of equipment I'm wary of touching for fear of electric shock. Worst of all, the room is uninsulated, so it stays bone-chillingly cold in the wintertime, as it is now. So cold that I typically wear my down jacket. Where I find comfort and inspiration is in my things, paintings, books, and little knickknacks, all of the trinkets I've collected over the years. My eyes rest on my special shelf, on something resting between the other family relics I keep stashed there, a broken clay pipe. Diving was serious business. Our captain barked his orders. Check the regulator. Apply the defogging gel to your goggles. For Christ's sake, Max, stay out of my center console. And my cousin Ellery and I, in those days, just doe-eyed children, did our best to do exactly as we were told. On dives, we mumbled and grumbled. These were always my uncle's ideas, the many adventures we tagged along for. Other kids around our age built sand castles and hunted for sand dollars, and we envied them from the waterline. Truthfully, we didn't wish to dip a single toe in the water. Main stretch of the Atlantic is a special kind of cold, one that refuses to budge even in the warmest months of the year. To the unaccustomed, it seems to possess some unique manner of stinging the skin and shriveling delicate extremities. To this, my uncle would cry, "Isn't that what wetsuits are for?" Which in sea speak meant that we were to keep our mouths shut, follow orders, and complete all of the necessary checks required for us not to drown. After the initial shock of the ice-cold ocean, the three of us entered a different world altogether, an alien planet with rules entirely unlike our own, where words were bubbles and levitation the primary means of transportation. So foreign to my cousin and myself, yet to my silly, boisterous uncle, so perfectly suitable. While Ellery and I struggled to clear the pressure in our ears and maintain proper buoyancy, my uncle would watch with a grin hidden behind his mouthpiece, floating effortlessly. As we fumbled about, Uncle Chris would make himself busy gliding lazily through the murk to play with the other sea creatures, flicking fingers at pufferfoot fish to make them blow up. We laughed together in big clouds of bubbles. Our missions were always for the sake of more than simple exploration. Our true purpose, the hunt for treasures. We found many things underwater: anchors, photocopiers, a single dollar bill that floated inches above the seafloor. On one occasion, we discovered an entire car. To collect these treasures, Uncle Chris had bought a special diver's purse, a netted duffel held shut by a big steel trap. At purchase, he lied to the cashier and told them the handbag was a present for his daughter. The doe-eyed youngsters remained unconvinced. We knew all too well, exchanging scant glances in the unvacuumed back seat of the uninspectable Dodge Ram, that as much fun as it was to search for sunken treasure, to our captain, our missions were just as much about poaching lobsters, a secret we cousins laughed about on the bouncy ride home to Cape Nettic. The pipe was discovered somewhere in the murk around Nubble Lighthouse. Uncle Chris called our attention, barking orders in a flurry of hand signals. The thing, whatever it was so well camouflaged that neither Ellery nor I had noticed, even as we had floated directly over it. Visibility is something forecasted for divers, and like the weather forecast above the waterline, it's often unpredictable. A reality of life below the surface is that it is often hard to see. Reaching blindly through murky clouds of silt and particulates, I raked my fingers across the seafloor in search of treasure, kicking up all sorts of muck. It would have been impossible to be sure that I had mucked across anything of any sentimental value, but in good faith, I shook my fistful of mud and waited for the clouds to settle. When brought into the light that shone downwards from the surface, the pipe shone crystal clear. Its brilliant meerschaum glowed the same color as whalebone, a beautiful discovery. Even through thick neoprene gloves, I could feel how delicate, how precious it was. Back on dry land, the three of us sat together on the carpet of my uncle's living room, drying our salty sea hair next to his fireplace, pouring through hefty stacks of books. According to a dive bar friend of his, pipes of our kind were a treasure unique to New England, that the gruff Yankee sea captains of yore had a habit of tossing pipes overboard. And though a rare find, pipes like ours weren't entirely uncommon. It was also said to be possible to date these pipes with the right kind of diving book. The books we rifled through way back when are now long gone, and my memory of the date with them. But Ellery had been the one to discover our pipe hidden in those pages and won the privilege of picking the movie for the evening. Something we had undoubtedly watched 1,000 times before. Indiana Jones, A New Hope, The Godfather. We both fell asleep on his shoulder. Through adolescence, these memories settled in the silt of my mind and were lost to me. Lost until years later when, as a family, we met to clear out Uncle Chris's house. I was told to tape up boxes and sweep the cold fireplace. One by one, we switched off the lights. In the garage were my uncle's hoards of treasure, paintings, books, little knickknacks, as well as countless mischievous projects in the works. A stubborn motorcycle that refused to turn over now lay in carefully organized pieces, never to be put back together again. To catch the mess of motor oil, the garage floor had been lined with junk mail. My eye caught letters from AARP, knowing my uncle was at least 20 years too young to be receiving them. I snagged a pair of ratty telemark ski boots mended with duct tape, though I suspected I would never wear them. They were 3 sizes too big for me. Everything was up for grabs to whoever had space in their trunk. The rest would be sold at auction. Before I left, I found the pipe resting on the windowsill. That night, when I returned to my desert island, a windowless basement apartment in Boston, I drowned myself in liquor. And at some point, I found myself in front of the bathroom mirror with the smoking pipe. I had stuffed the delicate thing with twisted hairs of stale tobacco rolled out of a stray cigarette. It was hard to light. The strands were dry and brittle and cracked in my fingers. Salty tears dampened my face, not unlike the cold ocean spray off York Beach. My face was puffy and red, like one of my uncle's stolen lobsters. In my reflection stood the Yankee captain at the helm of a runaway schooner caught in the grasp of a violent maelstrom, hopeless, scared. At present, it is too cold to consider any diving. My space heater continues to flip the breaker, shutting off the lights, a real nuisance. I still haven't come up with anything, spending all this time floating around, reaching blindly through the silty murk of daydreams and painful memories that still sting. Enough thoughts of the forlorn pipe. Back to the makeshift office and to my staring contest with the empty page, wondering which thoughts I might bring into the light, which ones I might keep hidden on my shelf, and which ones I might toss overboard for someone else to find. Whew, okay. Thank you for putting up with that. Jim.
Hello.
Jimmy's here on the spot, Jim.
It's all right, Wayne.
Okay, perfect.
I'm up.
Yeah, you're up,
All
man.
right. I've never had this happen before. So I guess it's an honor. So,
Just to introduce our next speaker, James Washington Jr. and his wife, Mary Lou, are longtime Hanover residents. Writing poetry is a joy for Jim, topped only by writing poetry within a diverse, supportive community of highly talented Mouse student writers. Jim will graduate Mouse spring term 2024, which yes, already happened. Go for it, Jim.
thank you very much for the introduction. And thanks to the Howe for again giving us a special place to share a community of writers and their thoughts. It's kind of especially nice to be in a smaller community this evening because I feel like everything around me is chaos right now. I'm paying attention to the situation in Florida, which seems like every minute it gets even more monstrous. And we know everything else that's going on in the world. So to be here with you tonight is a much appreciated respite, and I appreciate your being here. I have two poems to read. I think I'll go with one that's called On the Crumbled Asphalt. And I need to give just a little bit of a setup for this. It begins with a quote. And I'll give you the name of the person quoted. This was a poem that took me a long time to enter, to find how to write, because the topic is something that is so internationally known. And what else can be said after all of the different approaches that people have taken to recognizing that situation? Okay, so I'll do my quote first, bear with me. Mama, Mama, Mama. George Floyd. On the crumbled asphalt of my childhood, we Black kids on our layaway bikes split even into cops and robbers on any another outside day. We wore black Converse sneakers with whole soles and topside wrapped just as they do on nature TV. Alligators subdued, snout to jaw hinge by noose rope, in cold blood swamp men. Sunny days or not, a quad of old school single mothers, stockings knotted above their calves, talked at the stoops of should have been long condemned public housing. They all knew who we were and whose mothers we belonged to. If we got too rambunctious, their magic sent word already ahead before we and our floppy high tops could run home with a plausibility. Come to think about it, those peel-eyed mothers were like our civilian police oversight committee, making sure we played cops and robbers fair. And of course, we were never stupid enough to hold the captured kneeling knee to neck on that blistering concrete. No way. That craziness would never be fair. The next is a poem about looking back. And this one, it took me a long time also to find a way to get into this particular poem. It's about my uncle. So this is kind of actually autobiographical. I use his name here. And to this day, I still miss him. I miss him a ton. This one's called Riding Shotgun. As a little me, my Uncle James was my surrogate dad, a man of idioms. Just think, riding shotgun. That was old school television days, Gunsmoke. A stagecoach up front, a cowboy. Reins undulate, horse neck stretch for a backbone busting ride on wood wheels. At his right, protection, clothes tailored from dust, shotgun at lap, on lookout, cowboy ready. I cried hard when my uncle left Boston for New York City for good. As an adult, my knowledge distilled, I get his black man gayness, confined at a time in a black neighborhood, swollen full of disapproving black Bibles. I see the need of a metropolis to allow camouflage so that he could just be. If my uncle had told me back then, I would have said, fine with me. I'd have been so proud to ride shotgun with him. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. That was really powerful. Next up, on the screen, we have Bahishta. I can give you a little intro for the crowd. Bahishta Sadat is an activist and advocate for women's rights in Afghanistan. She launched the first national hotline project, the toll-free helpline for women and children in Afghanistan, which aimed to reduce violence against women. Bahishta has dual bachelor's degrees, one in political science from the American University of Afghanistan and another in public health from Kabul Medical University. She has been awarded as an Ambassador of Peace in the years 2009 and 2012, and was recognized as a standout leader for women's rights in 2021 and 22, and was recognized and recently graduated with a Master's degree in General Studies and received the B.M. Shaw Brownstone Thesis Excellence Award for her thesis named Women, War, and Reproductive Health, an analysis of Afghanistan during 1980 to 2023.
Thank you so much for the nice introduction. Can you hear me right? Thank you so much for the very beautiful introduction. That was too much for me. And it's so special to be here among you. I mean, just even so special for me because I never knew that I would miss school right after graduation this soon, but we missed it. So it's very great to see beautiful faces. A big hello to Professor Minardi, Professor Rosenthal, James, and all my other friends. Um, Today I'm reading one of my pieces, which I wrote last summer, inspired by Professor Minardi and Professor Krieger's class in creative writing. The title is Echoes of Home, Generations in Transition. It's on page 16. I would try to skip some parts to keep it short, but we'll see. As I wander through the corridors of my earliest memories, I find my 4-year-old self back at the first house in the heart of Cobble City. As I'm retracing my steps to our first house, I enter a big yard with a green lawn that stretches like a soft emerald carpet. 3 fruit trees, an apple tree, a peach tree, and a pear tree all bear a generous harvest during the seasons, and their branches offer a comforting shade under which we played games and shared stories. I see rows of herbs and plants. I inhale deeply. The air is infused with the fragrance of mint and basil, complemented by the gentle presence of delicate roses. In the corner of the yard, the mighty sunflowers tower proudly, resembling vigilant guardians watching over the space they embrace. Their faces always reach for the sun, lending a fabulous view to the courtyard. The building itself is white painted, with 3 floors and 13 rooms, each with its own story to tell, standing tall with an air of dignity. The house is more than just bricks and mortar. It holds the legacy of my grandfather. He was a homeless orphan in a small town in Kabul. He got an education and became an interpreter with Germans. He made enough money to buy multiple houses in his little town, also in the heart of Kabul city, where the building is located. As grandma recalls, he had a fondness for the city life, but he also valued the idea of keeping the family close and united. Unfortunately, his life was cut short too soon before he could make that move. Nevertheless, the house held profound significance as a symbol of his tireless efforts and weavering dedication. As for my grandfather's wish, our extended family came together to form a lively household. Their 3 families coexisted. My grandmother, my own family of 6, my parents, 3 siblings, and I, and 2 of my uncles, which each with 3 children of their own. With a total of 10 kids and 7 adults, the house was a hub of energy, laughter, and mischief. Our clan of cousins spanned a wide range of ages, from 1 to 10-year-old. These were a delightful blend of shared adventures and playful humor. In that house, respect was the core principle that shaped our coexistence. Although each of the families led their independent lives while cherishing a strong sense of unity, weekdays were marked by separate family dinners to unwind and enjoy personal moments, But on the weekends, the house transformed into a hub of togetherness and joyous potlucks. We would spread a big sofra, a cloth or low table for serving food on the floor, and everyone would sit on the edges with a vibrant mix of flavors and dishes in the middle. Yet there were days even more special than the weekends, Ramadan days. As the sun dipped below the horizon, our parents patiently waited to break their fast. For us children, the moment was magical. As we would gather outside, ears perked to catch the Muslims' call for prayers. With the call echoing in our ears, we would rush back inside to share the news with our parents. It was a moment of unity as we all sat down together to eat in the blessings of Ramadan. As the evening progressed, conversations would flow freely, uh, weaving tales of the past, dreams for the future, and the simple joys of the present. However, the world outside our doorstep was different. My mom was not allowed to show her face in public. She could not go outside alone. If she took me with her, she would remind me that if people asked you about your name, tell them your baby brother's name. And I would do so, as I was told. My hair was always short, because the Taliban were ruling the country at the time. Women were not allowed to go outside without a male member of the family. They had to wear blue burqas. Girls were forbidden from attending school. But my mom took it upon herself and became an educator at our home. Every day she gathered my cousins and the girls from our neighborhood on the street. Girls in colorful dresses sat before an old make blackboard, eagerly listening to my mom's lessons. I too would join them with a pen and a notebook, trying to learn how to read and write in Farsi, and some math lessons like learning how to count. In those days without electricity, the nights seemed long and dark. Even if we had electricity, watching TV was not allowed. Taliban. As the hours stretched, my dad became the storyteller. He would tell us about his days as a soldier or tell us about grandpa's stories. My mom would sometimes chime in, telling us about the movies she had watched before the Taliban took power. In the glow of the moon and the stars, my cousin gathered around the terrace, their eyes gleaming with curiosity, hanging on to every word they spoke. The sky was huge and beautiful. Looking up in the skies, I would get distracted by the twinkling stars and lose track of the stories. At night, I was shooting stars in the sky, and during the day, I would get excited by seeing airplanes leaving stripes of clouds behind them. I would chase the fading lines of the aircraft's routes in the sky and call my siblings and cousins to watch them with me. The nights were getting colder and days shorter. The trees were ready to offer the sun. Green lawn faded to a shade of yellow, and sunflowers now dry and ready to spring their seeds. It was a time for transition, not only for nature, but also for us. Our next door friend left for Iran, and the other neighbors on the other side left too. People left without saying goodbye. My mom and my dad anxiously I heard my mom and my dad talking anxiously about leaving the country. It was October 2001 when the US invaded my country. They started bombarding Kabul, and some of our relatives left the country. But my family decided to stay and protect the house. Kabul was completely locked of electricity due to the war, but the absence of light cast a haunting darkness upon the city, rendering it unrecognizable, like a ghostly apparition. The skies, once filled with stars and moonlight, now held an eerie darkness. They were dominated by military jets with flashing red lights. From above, they cast bombs upon the city, shaking the very ground we stood on. I had no interest in chasing the airplanes anymore. Flashing red lights haunted me with the horror they carried. With every explosion, the shock wave would rattle the windows. I would hide beneath my blanket, my hands pressed firmly against my ears, and tears would stream down my cheeks until my dad would hear my muffled cries and rush to my side and gently turn my side, shielding me from the view of the windows. Dad would ask me to close my eyes, not to turn my face, and count to 50 3 times. He knew how to keep my brain busy. With every sunset, a sense of dread would haunt me, knowing that the night was about to begin. Every time I glance at my innocent 1-year-old sister, peacefully asleep and blissfully unaware of the terrors outside, I would say to myself, I wish I was a baby too. One day, my uncle's wife came to our house and watched my mom washing her blue burqa. She laughed and said, "Good for you, you will never wear that again." My mom's face lit up and smiled. The Taliban were gone. People were happy walking in groups, raising the Afghan flag on the streets. The shops were throwing the Taliban's flags away, and my mom took us to the photo studio to get pictures for school registry. Soon we started school, and my mom officially became a teacher in a high school. But it was also at the time for us to leave that house and rent it for good. We relocated to a new house close to my maternal grandma, while my uncles scattered across different parts of Kabul, each carving out their own path. Little did I know that this departure would be the final farewell to the place, and I would never see that house again. Our old house found a new purpose, transforming into a center of hope and support. A strategic location attracted the attention of an international organization dedicated to supporting children with impaired vision, providing them with a chance to access specialized education. It was heartwarming to know that the place where I had grown up served as a heaven for these children, something that my grandpa would be even prouder of. Exactly 20 years later, in 2021, my 4-year-old daughter experienced a similar situation. This time it was not an invasion, but rather the withdrawal and the fall of government to the Taliban. Now I wonder what my daughter's earliest memory will be. How many more generations might witness such events in the future? Thank you.
Nick Brago is a fiction writer from the Bay Area of California. He is the editor-in-chief of Utter Times, a new digital magazine. He digs the outdoors, movies, and tabletop role-playing games. Supposedly, he cannot juggle, though he is still definitely a clown.
Thank you back. Is there a time on this? Should I read part of this? What's,
I think you should share everything.
all right. This is a story I wrote called Time for a Cowboy to Dream. I'll just get into it. I had a dream last night about cowboys. It was related to finding my sister. I don't know for sure though. The details drained out of my head the moment I woke. I got out of bed around 1. I checked my voicemail and there was nothing. I went around town and a few of the posters had tags torn off, but that's probably just the hopeful doing their job of being hopeful, thinking when I see this girl, I'll know exactly who to call. But I appreciated the hopeful for doing their job. It gave me some hope. I tried to get lunch at Zait's Indian Palace and they still wouldn't let me in. That's crazy. I mean, I totally respect it, but that's crazy. I wish I remembered how I got banned from an Indian lunch buffet because I did it. Not that I remember it, but it's done, and how'd I do it? I think it just stains bad. When I woke up in the drunk tank that next morning, my pants and shirt were caked in red curry, and that stuff hasn't come out at all. Damn. Zait's does have white carpets. That morning, the cop in the drunk tank told me that I had to get my act together. Told me that there were doers and watchers and that I shouldn't be a watcher because I'd spend my life watching people do what I wanted. The cop must have been a failed theater student, the way he talked about doing and watching as if it all made orderly sense. As if I could spend my life watching people find my sister. I'd love that. I told the cop then that I couldn't do anything else and it was in their hands now. He said, I'm the master of my own destiny. I said, that's easy to say when you got the keys and the gun. I imagine that's why I wasn't proclaimed sober enough to leave until that night. Walked out all crusted in curry. Anyway, that was a while ago. So today, after I failed to enter Zait's again, I went to the park and sat out in the sun and I thought about drinking. I don't know why I thought about it. I know why I thought about it. Every night when the sun was down, it'd call me, or I'd call it, or we'd both find each other beside the liquor cabinet. I don't know. We had a strong take-take relationship. I took the bottle, it took my night. What a miserable dance. I knew it wasn't a healthy relationship, but sometimes, though, it doesn't matter. I walked around the park as I began to sweat. It got my mind off drinking and the fact that I didn't have a job anymore. They'd let me go to help me deal with familial issues, and so now I had nothing to do but walk and people watch and have familial issues. I found myself at the community court board and I scanned the postings. The garbage company had scheduled an Oktoberfest event in August, a Christmas party on Thanksgiving Day. The world was going tits up. There was a cat poster and a dog poster. Guess they were missing too. The old folks' home was having their monthly garage sale, but I wasn't welcome there anymore. Salty, well, her name was Sandy, but I called her Salty, keeps a handgun in her stomach rolls when she bargains off her Cabbage Patch dolls. I can't really negotiate with someone who plays that much hardball. Someone had pinned an advertisement for puppies over the poster of my sister. I unpinned it, balled it up, and threw it away. Puppies are nice and all, but puppies can't tell me that Peppa Pig is actually 6'2" and would knock my teeth out in a bar fight. No, that's what sisters are for. Beneath my sister's poster was a fresh piece of paper. I pulled it off, and it was a handwritten note that said, "Seeing about saving a woman. Find me in the desert next dawn. Won't wait too long." I held the note and glanced at the picture of my sister. She grinned in black and white without those front teeth of hers. I sat down in the grass and flipped this handwritten note over and over, and there was nothing on the other side. I thought about being a doer or a watcher. And if I couldn't be a doer for my own life, I could be a doer for someone else's. I could help this person, help them seeing about saving this woman. I laughed. I looked around and I was alone, so I kept laughing. Here I had my damsel in distress. Had to go see about saving a woman, see? I brought in my chest. Where's my sword? Where's my horse? Got to see about saving a princess. I cackled. When I closed my eyes, I saw her toothy smile in that grainy photo on the corkboard. I pursed my lips and flipped the paper over in my hands. Maybe I'd help this person, see about saving a woman. Sure, whatever that meant. Early the next morning, I took my truck and drove east. I passed through the mountains and dropped down into the desert, the whole time flipping the note over in my hand, wondering if it'd suddenly sprout directions. But instead, the roads became worse, the way sand crowded the emergency lane, the way there wasn't an emergency lane, the way potholes were more frequent than straight, flat concrete, how it all then turned to gravel and finally dirt. In my rear view, the orange, dusty road plumed up behind my truck. The sun had started to rise. At the end of the road, there was a saloon. I parked and walked to the door. It was run down, shuttered, and shut. The large carved sign that swung over the nailed-together swinging door said, Willie's Spittoon. A smaller sign on the wall read, We've been closed for 173 years. Sorry. Damn, I said aloud. I peered through the broken window. Willie's Spittoon seemed like a nice saloon. I saw a long bar, round tables, and an old piano with the top thrown open. Some varmint's nest resting on the cords. My dad would have liked this place, but he was dead. So was my mom. I couldn't show them. It was just me and my sister, and I couldn't even show her. I walked back across the dirt lot to my truck. On the windshield, pinned under a wiper, was an envelope. How'd that get there? I looked around. Someone just snuck up while I was away and popped it onto my hood. That doesn't make sense. I'm the hero, ain't I? I'm supposed to be the one sneaking up and past people. I'm the one saving the damsel. And sadness rushed me. I couldn't even save my own sister. Who knows where she is and who has her? So how am I supposed to go and save someone else? I'm not a hero. I plopped down onto my ass in the dirt and I tore open the envelope. There was another handwritten note. It said, Leave the truck and walk the path over the hill. The sun rises. Be quick. I was scared. How did the note get there? If I walked the path over the hill, what the hell would I be walking into? Just to save some woman. Something clicked in that moment as I thought about the grainy photo of my sister on milk cartons across the street. None of the letters specified who this woman we'd be saving was. It's not impossible, right? And even then, the worst thing that happens is that I try to help someone else. For once, I try to be a doer. So I put the note in my truck and I grabbed my cowboy hat off the passenger seat. I stowed the keys behind the back wheel and I walked past Willie's spittoon on the faint trail that passed through the rugged trees and crested the dry hill. The sun was really getting up now and I started to feel good about myself. The cowboy hat I had on was my grandfather's and it was too big, but I liked the way it bounced in my head as I walked. I wore a crisp white button-up, blue jeans, and tan riding boots. I hadn't even gotten drunk last night. Had a few drinks, but something about knowing I had saving to do kept me straight. Things felt right. When I crested the hill, there was a shallow valley of orange dirt. In the thin shade of a dead tree, there was a round man on a big horse. Pawing nearby, roped to the dead tree, was another horse. I steadily made my way down the slope and across the dirt to the man. The man was wide, his face was dirty, and he smelled, or something smelled. The horses. God, I don't know what it smelled. The man tipped his hat to me and grinned. Many of his teeth were black remnants of what had been. 2 revolvers hung around his waist, a rifle slung over his back. He had a meaty hand that he dragged across the sweat-wet face. Howdy, I said. Sir, he said, seeing about saving a woman. I looked around. There was nothing in the dirt-filled valley but rocks and one dead tree. There was some breeze and maybe even opportunity. I suppose I am, I said. Well, get on Randall over there. It's late and we best be getting on. I tipped my hat and untied Randall and swung on. I was glad for years of riding lessons. All pays off in a moment like this. The man spurred his horse forward and I rode up beside him. We started north. As we went out, I saw him eyeing me. He cleared his throat and said, awfully small for a man. And you're awfully round for one, I said. The man laughed. He leaned back in his saddle as he sighed. Think we'll make a merry pair. We talked some as we rode over the far hill and down into the Great River Valley. Paul was a banker from Houston. His house had been robbed and his wife had been stolen. I told him, you can't really steal a woman, a person like that. He said sure, but that she was still just gone. So he rode all the way west and turned north into the Utah Territory. Now, we rode beside this wide great river. It gurgled and rushed by. It was clear. There was hardly even kicked up muck to besmirch the sight of the stones, or the fish who darted out of the eddies into the pool and then back into the calm. The sun had swept directly over the gap of the valley and it stood on us. I sweat, even under the brow of the wide hat, and Paul smelled. You know this kind of job, don't you? Paul asked, adjusting himself in the saddle as Checker, his horse, made the horse sound with his lips. Sure, I lied. Good, he said. I need folk like you. That's true, I said. So how you know your wife's even up here? I've been talking and tracking. Everyone's got ways to find the must-know information. He spit over his shoulder into the water. That we do, I said. We were the heroes. I forgot. Wasn't ever a question of when or where, only what and how. So I leaned back in my saddle in the sun and wished I had a whiskey on the rocks. I pushed the thought away. Drinking had its moments, and this wasn't one of them. Soon the sky darkened and thunder rolled in. Thick pelted rain mudded the dry ground. Paul led us under a bluff and said we'd wait the storm out here. I said I was fine riding through rain, and he said the rain wasn't the problem. Shortly after, the river became brown and fast and crept up the bank as it ate away at the land and tumbled it all downstream. We got to be careful here, Paul said. About the river? Not about the river. Just stay away from that. About time. There's only one trail that takes us out of this gorge. When it gets too dark, we'll miss it. So we'll have to wait until morning, and then we'll likely be late. Late for what? Who hired you? How much they tell you about all this? Well, I don't know. They didn't tell me nothing. He whistled and fidgeted on the large rock that he rested on. You know how to shoot? I don't. Paul rubbed his face with his dirty hands, then shook his head. He thought for a moment and then unbuckled his gun belt. Put it on, he said. The 2 revolvers were heavy and the belt sagged on my thinner waist, but it stayed there. Now he looked around. You see that rock jutting out from the middle of the river? Sure, I said. It split the water like a fin, like the river rushing around both sides. Take one of them irons out, he said, and aim it at her. Okay, I said. I drew one and leveled it at the rock. The first bullet went wide. The second clipped it. The third tore off the top of the rock. There it is, Paul cried. Hell, you shoot like that and we're merry as a cherry. I grinned. Good to know. Now reload it. You got rounds in that belt. I reloaded the revolver. I liked the way it felt in my hand. It was heavy, like a brick or a fist, smoking and steaming as the rain hit it. For a moment, I understood why Salty at the old folks' home kept a .45 in her gut. Because power is a vice. I twirled the gun around my finger and Paul screamed, Jesus, lad, put it down. Put it down. What you trying to prove? Twirl it again and it'll blow your head clean off. I nodded. I don't know what I'm trying to prove. That's okay, boy, but gunning yourself ain't going to prove it. I nodded again. We now sat much quieter under the stone bluff and the sound of the rain as we waited for the storm to pass. It did pass, and then we clopped through the mud until the sun had set and the true darkness cloaked the thin river valley. We stopped under the dry of a wide tree. Paul said no fire, that he'd wake me up before the sun rose, so I better go and get some sleep. I lay there for a long time beneath the chattering branches of the starlit night breeze. I thought about my sister and this woman. I doubted that they would be the same person, but I still hoped. After some time, I stood and walked a ways away and went to piss. I couldn't sleep, so when I returned and laid down, I thought about whiskey. As Paul rolled around in the dirt trying to get comfortable. I don't know if Paul ever fell asleep, but I did after I started alphabetically listing the whiskeys I knew. Somewhere around Southern Comfort, I fell asleep. Get up now, boy. The sun had a crescent of light which looked peelable off the rocky horizon, as if day still debated to exist or not. But it would. It always would. We saddled and continued down the river valley. Paul whispered, "You ever kill someone?" My stomach dropped. Yeah, I lied. But I picked my stomach back up. This was being a hero, wasn't it? Doing the grit that others didn't want. Wait, what'd you say? He hissed. Pay attention now, boy. Said I wanted to get there before they woke, but he clicked his tongue. We late. He trailed off, then said, I'm no good at this neither, but I know if we doing this right, we work together. So I thought up 2 commands. If I say run, we turn, heel, and bolt. I say storm, we run and press those fuckers till they pop, or we do, I suppose. We'll get him, I said. He nodded as day broke over the crest and color began to fill his silhouette. You're right. Maybe in an hour, I don't know, time feels fake out here. Paul led us up a cleft. Halfway up, we dismounted and he took both our leads. He fastened them behind a heavy rock and a small patch of shrubs. We almost there, I asked. Keep it down, he said, and he nodded. I looked up the slope where it topped out. I saw destiny. It was faint, like the last few stars of an early morning, but okay, this is what I want, the moment to be a doer. Paul brushed past me and trudged up the hill. I checked the chamber in his lever-action rifle. I rubbed my hands over the cool steel pieces that hung off my hips. I followed Paul up the slope. Above the cleft was the early touch of morning. There was an expansive orange flat, host to rough, prickly bushes that sounded like fingernails dragged against wood as they brushed across our pants. In the center of the flat, standing above the brush and rocks, was a shack. It had cloth windows and a sagging front porch. 2 horses had been tied up on the side. There was no light in the place. We slid through the shrubs and orange sand softly, so each step slipped soundlessly away. I started to worry. A 1/4 mile of land lay between us and the cabin. With each step, I imagined a light flickering alive on the porch as someone lit a lantern to see the mist of the morning punctuated only by us, stalking tall like scarecrows. Paul kept his rifle close to the nook of his shoulder, hawking eyes on that porch, so I fiddled with the button and unclipped a revolver. I let the heavy, cool metal rest in my palm as I drew it. The porch was still dark. Eternity has no shape or form because I endured it as we took boot over boot across the flat desert. At any twitch larger than a twig, we'd both go rigid and watch the darkened cabin in dreadful anticipation. With each drop of sweat that rolled off my face into my lips, I felt distance grow as if every step I'd taken, I'd take again tenfold. I never felt a day so alive. I never felt so full of purpose. To the metronome of my crashing heart, a great rage of meaning struggled awake as the day was livened by every lick of light, every chirp of rodent or bug, and every brutal second that passed. It ended as we stood 40 yards away. The front door swung wide open, and it clacked hard against the side of the building. A man in white long johns, stained brown, scratching his groin, sauntered out and stepped out and stopped. He squinted as he looked out toward us. Paul had dropped to a knee as he leveled him in his iron sights and fired. The man lurched back as he grabbed his chest. He stumbled and fell into the door of the cabin. Storm, Paul hissed, storm. I sprinted to the cabin. I jumped onto the porch and went to a cloth window. In one clean motion, I tore the cloth down and peered inside, seeing an older woman scrambling to load a revolver with rounds that rolled about on a slanted table. I aimed at her. She had a moment to look up. She said no before the bark of the revolver filled this small wooden room, and half her face slid off as she heaped onto the kitchen table. Paul barreled through the open door. I followed, stepping over the gurgling man in the doorway. Paul rang a shot into the ceiling and hollered, whoever else in here better start talking. The inside of the cabin was one large, cluttered room and 2 doors against the far wall. As Paul finished speaking, the door on the right opened and a large man heaving an axe over his head bolted out. Paul didn't have time to adjust his aim, so he lowered and tackled the man around the gut. There was a moment of struggle before they tumbled back into the other room. I went to help Paul, but I hesitated. There was the unopened second door. The woman, with her face missing, lay leaking on the kitchen table. My throat climbed up my neck and closed. She was dead, and Paul and the man rolled on the floor. Paul seemed to have the upper hand, and he gruffly said something. What was it? I don't know. I didn't care to know. I couldn't know. I approached the second door and opened it. There was a long, wide, dirty bed, and in the corner of the room, bound and gagged, was a woman. My heart leapt. I knew I'd be crying soon. From the other room was a crack of gunfire. One strained voice howled. I turned back and went to the other room. There were the chippings of wood, a workbench, and trinkets. The man with the axe was hunched against the wall. A bullet had gone through his neck, and he pawed at the blood that poured from his sticky hands. And he thought about things, I'm sure, as he died. Paul lay near the door, sweating, pale, scrunching, and holding the length of his shirt over his heart. Is she here? I felt numb, as if the person inside my head had taken a step back and watched. I think so, I heard myself say. Where? I watched myself go to the room and cut through her bonds with a knife that I'd found beside the bed. When her hands were free, she took the gag out of her mouth as she ran to the other room. I didn't get a good enough look at her, but it had to be my sister. I came all this way. I was the hero. Things like this work out. I wandered back to the wood chipping room, staring at her, wondering. This woman was older. How much older? How long had it really been? Darling, Paul said. His eyes were watering. What it means to see you. You're safe. Paul had dropped his hands from his chest where he'd scrunched up his shirt. Right over his left breast was a large gash. It flooded the shirt red. Paul wept. If I go, worth knowing you go on. Bloomin', he chuckled. Like that poetry you read me, darling. His head drooped, and he died. We gathered food and put it into a bag, which I threw over my shoulder. I found a twine-wrapped bottle of foul, strong hooch that I threw in too. She went to say goodbye to Paul, and when she did, I went to the horses tethered beside the building. I untied them and let them loose. The woman's voice was so gentle and kind, as I heard her whispering goodbyes to the dead man that she'd always loved. Was that what her voice sounded like? I tried to remember the last conversation I'd had with my sister, and I couldn't. I remembered the morning I'd found that she'd been taking, but nothing. Nothing there helped me remember the sound of her voice. I walked to the front as the woman walked out, and I only looked at her feet. Now that I was here, the idea of knowing if it was her or not, I couldn't bear it. I'd come all this way, saved her, but inside the shack, a fire had started. Guess that's how she wanted to forget all this. We trekked across the desert flat as the fire grew and the house groaned beneath it. We went down the bluff and grabbed Randall and Checker and let them graze in the sparse brush near the now calm river. I guess we'd head back. I rolled up my sleeves and washed my arms and my hands and my face in the river. I sat back on my ass by the shore and I started drinking the hooch from the twine-wrapped bottle. It tasted old and evil. Finally, I looked at the woman. She was in her undergarments bathing in the river. As she surfaced, her face reflected the light. In it, I saw the brow ridge and the pudgy nose. I saw the delicate eyes that had only hardened over years. I saw that she was my sister. Relief warmed me. I could feel it in every limb and finger and toe. I chuckled. I looked at my hands and then I looked at her again. I said, it's great having you back. You don't know, well, I don't know. The world felt so numb. I felt so numb. I drank long from the twine-wrapped bottle. The hooch burned its way down. I laid back in the dirt and I held my hands up as they silhouetted beneath the sun. Water beaded and dewed on the fine lines of use that wore down my palms. These were the hands of a doer, the hero, the one who saw results and wins, the one that order stood up for, to make room and sense of all the space and nonsense in the world. I can't say that I know you, sir, she said. I sat up to drink more and I coughed as it fought warmly down my throat. No, I said. Been a while. Faces and voices, hard to recall after so much time. I lay back down in the dirt. As I stared into the high, wispy clouds, I wept.
I think we're all grateful you shared the whole thing. Okay. Next up, we have Rebecca. Rebecca is currently a second-year Master of Arts Liberal Studies MALS. We are all familiar. Student at Dartmouth with a focus on creative writing. She holds an undergraduate degree in interdisciplinary studies with a concentration in psychology and counseling from Plymouth State University. Rebecca is also the proprietor of a thriving professional proposal and grant writing consultancy. With an emerging interest in satire and ambitions to explore the fiction genre, she aims to leverage her life experiences and academic insights into a successful career as a novelist. Probably she's not muted. Technical difficulty.
Fix it, Mac.
Okay. While we wait for Rebecca, looks like, yeah, okay. We might, introduce Joel, actually, to read, for now. Joel Papp is a graduate student at Dartmouth College. He earned his BA from Baylor University, studying film and English. At Baylor, Joel combined his love for writing and comedy and became the editor-in-chief of The Rope, the university's underground student satirical newspaper. Apart from that, he has satirical works published in the Boston Accent, a Boston-based online satire publication. His academic passions lie in satire, film, and literature, especially the intersection of the three.
Thank you, Mac. He's a gentleman and a scholar. This is just a short little piece I wrote, kind of focusing on medium specificity, how the same stories that are told through different mediums are conveyed in different ways, but still kind of represent the same story. This is playing God. The idea of playing God has existed as a prominent theme in literature throughout history, and even today it is used in storytelling for many different types of media. The story of a talented artist or scientist playing God and having their own creation come to life has been repurposed for centuries, one of the most popular ones being told in Ovid's Metamorphoses. Pygmalion, a notable bachelor and prodigious sculptor, despite his vows of chastity, carved a beautiful figure out of ivory which later became his living, breathing wife. In Book 10 of Ovid's Metamorphoses, the story of Pygmalion and Galatea is told, a popular story about an artist's obsession with their own work that has withstood the test of time. While there have been countless iterations of this story throughout history, one of the most notable ones exists as a painting at the Louvre in Paris, Guarini Pygmalion and Galatea. While the two works, a literary text and a visual painting, tell the same story, there are different technical and stylistic elements that are specific to each medium, which allows for unique themes to be elicited. These aspects of medium specificity enhance the separate works, giving rise to an enlightened conversation about the efficacy of medium and how, albeit different, they are equally important to the understanding and enjoyment of art as a whole. To start, Ovid details the story of Pygmalion, who sculpts a beautiful figure out of a block of ivory. The figure's beauty is unparalleled, and consequently, Pygmalion falls deeply in love with it. On the festal day of Venus, Pygmalion brings his sacrifices to an altar and very bashfully prays for a lover that resembles his ivory girl. Venus hears and grants Pygmalion's wishes, bringing this ivory girl to life. This girl, Galatea, later becomes Pygmalion's wife, and the two end up having a daughter together. In Guarini's painting, as you can see if you're following on page 48, Galatea, who previously existed as an inanimate ivory statue, slowly comes to life, her cold, milky white skin beginning to change. As seen in figure 1, a warm pinkish color starts forming on each of her hands, starting at her fingertips. As in Ovid's writing, Guarini was able to show the blushing of Galatea in her painting, with the warmth of her rosy cheeks bleeding through the icy exterior of her ivory skin. In the same way Galatea blushed and took in the sky and her lover together in Metamorphoses. Her warm undertones in the painting signify her body not only filling with blood, but also filling with love for Pygmalion. The depiction of Cupid, of course, is another glaring example of the birth of a mutual love by Guarini. Pygmalion, cautiously rejoicing, fearing he is mistaken, is both amazed and not entirely convinced of this miracle at first, and this is shown in figure 1 with an enthralled, submissive look on his face, with an outstretched hand reaching forward but not touching the mark in front of him. As one can see, Guarini's painting represents the pregnant moment of Ovid's text well, fitting as much of the narrative into the work as possible. Vis-a-vis medium specificity, Guarini's painting employs the ability to represent color, one of the most impactful elements in the work. Despite representing a sculpture in his creation, Ovid's work is admittedly more suited for a painting adaptation than a sculpture adaptation, with painting possessing the ability to show flesh tones that suggest a living, breathing body. Differentiating between real and fake flesh would be a daunting task when limited to the confines of marble and sculpture. Additionally, painting allows Guarini to include puffs of bright cloud framing Galatea, addressing her as the focal point of the work. The luxury of working with and creating light and color further enhances the narrative of the painting. The specific aspects of different mediums clearly have the power to alter and enhance the meaning in art. Ovid and Girodet told the same narrative, yes, but they each utilized the constraints of their respective mediums to the narrative's benefit, portraying powerful themes and introducing unique characters that are still recurring in art even today. From Frankenstein, originally by Mary Shelley, to Pinocchio, originally by Carlo Collodi, this idea of playing God has proliferated in storytelling. In text, image, film, and the like, the story of Pygmalion and Galatea has been told. Because of Ovid and Girodet paving the way as masters of their medium, art is better off now, and their contributions to the conversation around adaptation have left a positive, lasting effect on the celebration and appreciation of art.
Well done, Joel. Rebecca, are you there?
I'm here, sorry.
Wonderful.
If there's a reason I'm in liberal studies and not like IT or computer science, I belong right where I am.
Perfect. I'm not going to introduce you again, but
But,
take it away.
okay. I'm gonna come off camera or on camera for just a minute, but I just got back from hot yoga, so I'm also a hot mess. So I'm gonna be off camera as I read. But I wanted to say hi to my Mal's family. I miss everybody. Looking forward to getting back on campus in the winter. Okay. I wrote this piece after attending a childhood friend's mom's wake and feeling that jarring feeling of being placed back into your childhood surroundings and kind of grappling with what that means as an adult who's not that person anymore, but kind of like it's a very, very odd feeling that I tried to capture in this piece. So I've called it The Wake. An old white Victorian sets the backdrop. It's drizzling and dark. I steer my car up the driveway, headlights barely penetrating the pea soup fog. Right out of a horror movie, I grumble, straining to find the attendant. I spot him in the mist, black overcoat, black umbrella, expression grim, of course, and follow his outstretched hand to a vacant spot near the door. Though the lot is only half full, I thank the universe. I'd fussed with a straightener and applied some mascara for this event. More than a minute or two of this weather, and I'll walk in with Gilda Radner's hair. Why it matters hasn't come to me yet, but it does. I recognize that I'm anxious, not only for the awkward social interaction I fear will take place, but because I know what happens in this house. I know what I'll see, and I know what they'll see. I last set eyes on Maureen 3 decades ago. Strange, since we were best friends for 13 years. Sidekicks until freshman year of high school when one of us became cool and the other didn't. Everyone called her Mo. They called me Becky. 40 years have passed since we traded the treasure of our friendship for high school pettiness. At least one of us did. Mo's childhood home, less than a mile away from here, sits at the corner of Ridgefield Lane and an unnamed dead-end road. Her house was a hub for the neighborhood kids and a haven for me. I remember drinking cold cans of Pepsi at her kitchen table. Her mom was always nearby, puffing a parliament, the cigarette dangling loosely from her lips, held by spit or some law of gravity none of us understood. She paged through the soap opera digest with one hand and used the thumb of the other to absently work the spark wheel on her Bic lighter. Flick, spark, flick, spark, flick, spark. Stacks of unfolded laundry often overflowed from the unoccupied kitchen chairs, which she ignored. Mo's mom wasn't much of a housekeeper. On that day, sipping our Pepsis at Mo's kitchen table, we didn't think much about clothes or cars. We were unaware that most homes in our affluent Massachusetts town weren't decorated with threadbare couches and dried up linoleum floors peeled up in the corners and dulled yellow from tar and ink. Our economic disadvantage and the cruelty we'd endure for it emerged in junior high after the town's 4 elementary schools converged. Our new classmates showed up in Izod polos and Guess jeans, dropped off by equally well-dressed parents. We didn't yet care that Mo's parents drove a 15-year-old station wagon that wouldn't start in below freezing weather until we doused the radiator with a bucket of boiling water. We played kick the can at night and spent Saturdays choreographing dance routines in Mo's side yard, taking turns as Casey Kasem counted them down. Blondie, the Bee Gees, we cheered each other on until the finale, when whoever lucked into the week's #1 hit gave it their all. We taught ourselves gymnastics moves and walked the quarter mile to Pep's for penny candy whenever one of us had money. One time, a photographer from the local newspaper snapped a photo of us as we huddled under an umbrella during a rainy walk to the local pizza restaurant. We basked in our newfound celebrity after seeing the grainy black and white photo in the paper the next day. My last name was misspelled in the caption. Present day. As the attendant looks on, I park my car cattywampus, and a rush of self-consciousness jolts me. I decide to ignore him and turn off the ignition. I sigh. You can skip it, I offer myself. They don't know you're coming. I sigh again. I can't skip it. I grab my phone, think better of it, then stuff it in the already stuffed center console. I don't carry a purse, so I stash my keys in my raincoat pocket, flip the hood over my perfectly straightened hair, and trudge through the rain to the entrance. The house looks just as old inside, which fits. Dense with wallpaper and cove molding and overstuffed wingback chairs, the rooms are fussy and suffocating. I've been here many times because our predominantly Methodist Anglo-Saxon community loves a wake. They love displaying the dead bodies of friends and family like centerpieces. We're taught to exclaim, "She looks wonderful," or "He's at peace. They did a great job on him." Visitors cluster around the waxy dead body like they're warming themselves around a campfire. An occasional burst of laughter interrupts the melancholy as old friends share anecdotes and recall happier days when a living soul still occupied the dead body. God, I hate wakes. I don't understand the custom of displaying a dead body, nor can I grasp how doing so dignifies death or celebrates the deceased life. I glance at the casket surrounded by baskets of white flowers they'll throw in the dumpster when this is over. I force myself to view the body that housed Mo's mom for 78 years. She smoked every day of her life, but the formaldehyde and a thick layer of theater makeup have erased 20 years of damage. Stick a Parliament in her mouth, back up like you're viewing a Monet, and she's a 1970s era version of herself. I embrace Mo and marvel at the decades of life we've lived separately from one another. All at once, it's been forever and no time at all. I whisper condolences in her ear, recalling the Pepsi days and relaxing as I feel her hug me tighter. We laugh and reminisce, dabbing our eyes with tissues already too damp to be helpful. There was the time her mom let us drive the old station wagon. She sat shotgun while we made clumsy turns around the high school parking lot, laughing without losing her cigarette. It was right where it always was, anchored between her lips. There were sleepovers and marathon MTV viewing parties, countless rides to school, and those lazy days sitting at their kitchen table with nothing to do. I see more familiar faces from the old neighborhood, and theirs, like mine, have aged. We ignore the wrinkles and gray hairs and instead see ourselves through the lens of nostalgia, a tribe of free-range kids who knew that supper time came when the street lights turned on. We came to bid farewell to Mo's mom, who was our mom in all the ways that matter. I still hate wakes, but at that moment, we tugged on the sweet childhood tether that bound us, and it held. Thank you.
Wonderful. We have one more reader tonight. A board member on the last edition as well. That would be Arena, who's here with us tonight as well to read in person. Arena is a third-year Mouse student in creative writing. She lives in the Upper Valley with a betta fish and 4 children. Once she wrote and illustrated a book for her kids and decided to move forward in her writing experiments.
How beta fish dies. Suddenly, but you know. Yeah. And thank you, everybody. I want to share my story. It's a short story. It's part of my novel about Russian history. And I know that some people came to me and they really appreciate that I was brave enough to share some dark part of Russian history. And I just want to remind you that every nation has its own dark times. And it doesn't depend for you, Russians, Americans, whoever. People just need to survive and move forward for the sake of their families and kids. And but this story just about regular men who used to live at the beginning of 20th century in Russia. It's almost 100 ago. I try to be very short because I'm the last one, but it's short story anyway. The life of Alexei Ilyich. Alexei Ilyich Belov was a school teacher. He moved to Moscow from the Povолжье, escaping the Great Famine of 1921, when a severe drought swept millions of people along the newly established Soviet country. His parents and a young brother didn't survive. Weakened by the extreme lack of food, they had died from the typhus one after another. Only Alexei, whose whole authentic body was the subject of jokes from his school peers, stayed alive. Perhaps his thinnish flesh didn't require a lot of energy. One day, he found himself in the capital of the country, depleted by the Bolshevik Revolution, civil war, natural disaster, and subsequent famine and destruction. The young, sluggish man did not find his place in a big city. He tried to work in the post office, in the library, and then at school. However, busy Moscow life exhausted his long, flimsy body, and 1 year later, Alexei Ilyich moved to the Urals and became a school teacher in Verkhnyouralsk, a small town in the upper stream of the Ural River. He got a tiny room in the dorms for workers with a narrow bed, a wooden dresser, and a desk in the corner. His new bachelor dwelling wasn't home-like, but the location was good, next door from the school where he taught math, and a short walk from the Nikolsky Cathedral, where he spent the rest of his day. No, Alexei Ilyich was not so religious. He was interested in the local archives in a small, dim storeroom in the church. Every day he spent 2 or 3 hours reading yellowish documents, old letters, and other chronicles, which revealed the simple pattern of the Verkhnyouralsk history. At first, Alexei Ilyich went to the archives to kill lonely nights. He had nothing to do except look through the old papers. No interest in community life, no household to care for, and no children to scold in the evenings. But this dull and useless pastime turned out to be a gripping read about the pre-revolutionary time of a small merchant town, founded as a fortress in 1734. Tired from archives dust, Alexei Ilyich walked down the streets, imagining how merchants and peasants used to live there before the revolution. As in every small town, there was a church, 2 schools, 1 male and 1 female, a general store, a mill, and a cemetery. Pray, study, eat, and die, thought Alexei Ilyich. He didn't like that Bolsheviks combined male and female schools in one, giving equal education rights to both genders. He agreed that the newer social country would benefit from more skilled people. But what was the purpose of mixing boys and girls? Instead of solving the problems girls constantly chat, he was angry about his last math lesson in the 6th grade. Indeed, most girls did not want to stay in high school, quickly lost their interest in algebra and science, and returned to their home duties. Soon people got used to seeing the such slump figure of the weird math teacher with a novel face and sad eyes roaming in the town. They began greeting and talking to them, and Alexei Ilyich soon found his place in the rural community. Locals appreciated his interest in their past, which made Alexei Ilyich a vital member of the town's life. People began to bring their old photographs and papers from their homes, giving him a right to keep their memories. One day, the town chief, Председатель, asked Alexei Ilyich to marry his daughter Olga, a sandy-haired, blue-eyed, robust woman. Alexei Ilyich was unsure if he wanted to be married, but resigned to his fate. And the temptation to leave a family was stronger than Alexei Ilyich avoidance of responsibility for the wife and children. Olga turned out to be a vigorous woman who worked hard running their small household which consisted of a couple of cows, poultry, and a kitchen garden, without any assistance from her husband, who would not stand the farm life. In his turn, Alexeyevich spent his day in school, teaching restless children and arranging constantly growing town inheritance in the archives. In other words, he had nothing to do at home except help Olga, who loved children, conceive. Surprisingly, his weak body was fertile enough to bring at least one child to their house every 2 years. Elena was born first. Alexeyevich didn't care about the gender of his first child, like many other men, and was happy. He insisted only on the noble name of the baby girl, as he wanted to improve the low-class lineage of her mother. The next 10 years brought 5 more kids, two boys and 3 girls. 4 died from diphtheria croup one winter night, leaving Olga and Alexeyevich with 10-year-old Elena and 3-month-old Maria. Being a straightforward person, Olga was angry with her grief and blamed Alexei that her kids didn't survive. They were sweet as you are. Only Elena inherited my health, she cried in a paroxysm of rage when they came from the funeral. Olga wasn't right, as only Elena would her father's tall, thin, gracious body, his nobleness and inclination to intellectual work. However, it did not help Alexeyevich to recover from his loss. After the funeral, he spent a whole day somewhere, came home at night, and the next day, Elena found her father hanging on a maple tree in the backyard. The town lost its keeper of memories. Thank you very much. And just for a little, I just want to say thank you to Viva, who was an editor-in-chief last time, and I just want to show my respect to her because she was very soft but very determined and demanding, and we were not a very easy team, yes, but she was great. All we know that Viva is a great writer, and we know her voice, but Viva is a great leader, and I insist you to be a leader further because you're great. Thank you very much. I would also say thank you to Maria, who graduated long ago with honors from our program, but who is still helping us to make this event possible. And thank you for your cooking and for your hospitality. Thank you very much.